The emergency transmission cut through the silent void of space, its signal degrading with each passing second. "This is Outpost Sigma 7. We're under attack." The shield. Static interrupted the message before it continued, more desperate than before. "It's here. The Nighthawk. Our weapons air." The transmission ended abruptly, joining the growing collection of final moments from human colonies across the Outer Rim. Admiral James Harrison stood before the holographic display in the Strategic Command Center of Earth Defense Force Headquarters, his weather-worn face illuminated by the soft blue glow of dozen missing colony markers. Each red dot represented another silent outpost, another lost battle against an enemy that seemed to defy the laws of physics itself. "Sigma 7 makes the 12th colony this month, sir," Lieutenant Commander Rachel Hayes reported, her voice steady despite the weight of the news. She manipulated the display controls, bringing up footage from the colony's last defense satellites. Same pattern as the others. No warning, no trace, just complete destruction. The footage showed only empty space, then a brief flash of light as the colony's main reactor went critical. The Nighthawk-class vessel, pride of the Zoraxian fleet, had lived up to its fearsome reputation once again. 3 centuries of human expansion into the stars, and not once had anyone even captured a clear image of the ship. "Show me the sensor data," Harrison ordered, running a hand through his silver hair. The holographic display shifted, revealing streams of technical information that had become all too familiar. Energy readings jumped chaotically before the attack. Space-time distortions appeared and vanished without pattern. And then, nothing. The quantum analysis team reports the same findings as previous attacks. Hayes continued, pulling up additional data streams. "Whatever cloaking technology the Zoraxians use, it doesn't just bend light. It seems to fold reality itself around the ship. Our best sensors can't even detect its wake." Harrison's eyes narrowed as he studied the data. In all his years of service, he'd never encountered anything like the Nighthawk. The Zoraxians had created the perfect predator, a ship that could strike without warning and disappear without trace. Its very existence seemed to mock humanity's pride in their technological achievements. "What about the new detection grid we installed?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Completely useless, sir. The grid didn't register anything until the attack was already underway. By then," Hayes let the sentence hang, the implication clear. By then, it had been far too late for the colony's 3,000 inhabitants. The Admiral turned away from the display, walking to the reinforced windows that overlooked the sprawling defense complex below. Earth's most advanced research facilities, their best scientific minds, all working tirelessly to find a way to combat this invisible terror. So far, they had nothing to show for their efforts except a growing list of dead colonies. "The civilian population is getting restless," Hayes said softly, joining him at the window. "The news networks are starting to ask questions we can't answer. How do we fight something we can't even see?" Harrison's reflection stared back at him from the polished glass, the lines on his face deeper than ever. "We keep fighting, Commander. We adapt. We learn. The Zoraxians may have their perfect ship, but they've forgotten something crucial about humanity." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Sir, we're at our most dangerous when backed into a corner," Harrison replied, his voice taking on a steel edge. "Every attack leaves data. Every destruction teaches us something new. The Nighthawk may be invisible, but nothing in this universe is truly perfect. We'll find its flaw. We always do." As if in response to his words, another alert flashed across the holographic display. Another colony had gone dark. Another 3,000 lives snuffed out by an enemy they couldn't see. The Nighthawk was still out there, hunting in the darkness between stars, its perfect record intact. But unknown to both the hunters and the hunted, the seeds of its downfall were already taking root. In a small research station at the edge of human space, a brilliant mind was about to notice something that everyone else had missed. The countdown to the Nighthawk's final hunt had begun. Dr. Amanda Blackwood stared at the holographic display until her eyes burned, the quantum probability matrices floating before her like ghostly constellations. The lab around her had gone dark hours ago, but she barely noticed. Something in the data called to her, a pattern hidden behind the chaos of numbers and theoretical models. "Computer, run simulation series Echo 9 again," she commanded, her voice hoarse from too much coffee and too little sleep. "Focus on the gravitational distortions this time, not the light spectrum." The display shifted, the previous data melting away as new patterns emerge. Most scientists had focused on finding visual or energy signatures from the Nighthawk, but Amanda had always seen things differently. Her colleagues at the New Gibraltar Research Station called her methods unorthodox. The Military Research Board had used less kind terms when they rejected her previous grant applications. But she knew she was right. The clue to finding the invisible had to lie in what it left behind. "Analysis complete," the computer announced. "Gravitational anomalies detected in 78% of attack scenarios." Amanda leaned forward, her heart racing. "Show me the common factors between each anomaly. Filter out everything except quantum-level distortions." The hologram reorganized itself, most of the data points fading away until only a faint web of interconnected lines remained. To most observers, it would have looked like random noise, statistical ghost images that could be explained away as sensor malfunctions or background radiation. But Amanda saw something else, something impossible. "Computer, cross-reference these patterns with standard space-time topology models," she said, her fingers dancing over the control panel. "Look for areas where local gravity shows quantum-level inconsistencies." The computer processed for several long moments. "Warning. Detected patterns do not conform to known physical laws. Recommend recalibration of sensor arrays." "No," Amanda whispered, a smile spreading across her face. "They don't conform because we've been looking at this all wrong. The Nighthawk doesn't just bend light around itself. It bends the very fabric of space-time." She pulled up the historical data from previous attacks, her mind racing ahead of the computer's analysis. Every supposedly perfect cloaking event had left behind these tiny tears in reality, like microscopic scars in the universe itself. They were almost impossible to detect unless you knew exactly what to look for. "Dr. Blackwood," a voice called from the lab entrance. "It's 3 in the morning. The director asked me to remind you about the lab's power conservation protocols." Amanda barely glanced at the young research assistant. "Tell Director Reynolds I'm onto something. Something big. The Nighthawk's cloaking technology. I think I know how it works." The assistant hesitated. "Ma'am," the director was pretty clear about. "Look at this," Amanda interrupted, gesturing to the display. "Every time the Nighthawk attacks, it leaves behind these quantum signatures. They're like creases in a piece of paper after you folded it. The ship doesn't just hide from our sensors. It physically removes itself from our space-time reference frame." That's impossible," the assistant said, moving closer despite himself. "The energy requirements alone would be massive." "Yes, which is why they can only maintain it for short periods." Amanda's fingers flew over the controls, bringing up more data points. "But here's the thing. These creases, they're predictable, mathematical. If we can track them, we can find the ship. No one's been able to see the Nighthawk because they've been looking in the wrong dimension." She straightened up, suddenly aware of how long she'd been hunched over the display. Her back cracked in protest, but she ignored it. After months of dead ends and failed theories, she finally had something solid, something real. "Get me a direct link to Earth Defense Command," she said, her voice taking on an edge of authority that made the assistant step back. And wake up Director Reynolds. Tell him we need to begin modifying the station's sensor arrays immediately." As the assistant hurried away, Amanda turned back to her data. The patterns hung in the air like a promise, a key to finding the unfindable. The Zoraxians had created the perfect predator, but they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed that if something couldn't be seen, it couldn't be found. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Absolutely not," Director Reynolds declared, his holographic image flickering slightly in the conference room's projection field. "We're not diverting critical station resources based on theoretical physics and quantum guesswork." Dr. Amanda Blackwood fought to keep her composure, aware of the 5 other department heads watching the exchange. She'd spent the last hour explaining her discovery, only to face the same brick wall of military bureaucracy that had dismissed her previous research. "With all due respect, Director, this isn't guesswork," she said, pulling up the latest simulation results. "The mathematical models are sound. The Nighthawk's cloaking system works by creating localized space-time distortions, and those distortions leave traces we can track." "Dr. Marcus, you're our head of applied physics," Reynolds said, turning to a gray-haired man who'd been silent throughout the presentation. "What's your assessment?" Dr. Marcus adjusted his glasses, studying the data with a critical eye. "The math is unorthodox, but I can't find any obvious flaws in the basic premises. If Dr. Blackwood is right about the quantum signatures, it could explain why our traditional detection methods have failed." "Could." Reynolds emphasized the word. "We're fighting a war, Doctor. I need more than theoretical possibilities." Amanda stepped forward, her patience finally breaking. 3 more colonies have gone dark since I started this presentation. How many more people need to die before we're willing to try something new?" The room fell silent. Even Reynolds seemed taken aback by the intensity in her voice. "I found a team willing to help," she continued, softer now. "Dr. Sarah Wells from Quantum Engineering. Dr. James Chen from Advanced Sensors. Even that crazy theoretical physicist from Europa Station, Dr. Michael O'Neill. They've all reviewed my work, and they're all ready to start immediately." "O'Neill?" One of the department heads scoffed. "The same O'Neill who claimed he could build a time machine. The same O'Neill who revolutionized our understanding of quantum entanglement," Amanda countered. "Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the people willing to think differently." Reynolds rubbed his temples, a gesture Amanda had come to recognize as his internal struggle between protocol and pragmatism. "Even if, and I stress if, your theory is correct, modifying the station's sensor arrays would leave us vulnerable for days. The Nighthawk could attack at any moment. Or we could do nothing and wait for it to attack anyway." Dr. Marcus interjected, surprising everyone. "I'm changing my position, Director. I think we should give Dr. Blackwood's team a chance. The mathematical framework is sound, and right now, we have nothing else." The next few minutes stretched like hours as Reynolds considered the proposal. Amanda could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes. The risk versus reward, the potential political fallout if he approved such an unorthodox project. Finally, he spoke. "You have 72 hours, not a minute more. If you haven't produced concrete results by then, we return the systems to normal configuration." Amanda felt her heart race. "Thank you, Director. We'll need access to full access to all sensor systems and the primary computer core," Reynolds finished for her. "Yes, I know. You'll have it. But Dr. Blackwood." His expression hardened. "If you're wrong about this, if you waste our time and resources on another dead end, your career in the Defense Force will be over." "Understood." She nodded, already running through the modifications they'd need to make. The risk to her career meant nothing compared to the lives at stake. As the meeting disbanded, Dr. Marcus approached her. "I hope you know what you're doing, Amanda. The military doesn't forgive failure." She looked at him, a slight smile playing at her lips. "The Zoraxians don't forgive existence, Professor. Besides, I'm not going to fail. For the first time since this war started, we're finally asking the right questions." Within an hour, her team had assembled in the main laboratory. As they began the delicate process of reconfiguring the station's sensors, Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against more than just Reynolds' deadline. Somewhere out there, the Nighthawk was hunting, and she knew in her bones that New Gibraltar Station was on its list of targets. Dr. Michael O'Neill's hands flew over the calibration controls, his wild gray hair standing on end from running his fingers through it too many times. "The quantum field sensors are operating at 230% of normal capacity," he announced, his Irish accent thicker with exhaustion. "Any higher, and we risk burning out the entire array." 68 hours into their 72-hour window, the laboratory had become a fortress of empty coffee cups and discarded energy bar wrappers. Dr. Amanda Blackwood stood at the main console, her eyes fixed on the stream of data flowing across multiple holographic displays. "Keep it there," she said, making minor adjustments to the detection algorithms. "Dr. Chen, how are the gravitational sensors holding up?" James Chen didn't look up from his station. "The new calibration is stable, but these readings don't make any sense. According to this, we're seeing quantum-level gravity fluctuations throughout the entire sector." "That's because we're finally looking at the right layer of reality," Amanda replied, a small smile playing at her lips. "Those fluctuations have always been there. We just didn't have the right tools to see them." Dr. Sarah Wells, who had been silent for the past hour, suddenly straightened in her chair. "Wait, something's different. The pattern in Grid Sector 7. It's not random." Amanda was at her station in 3 quick strides. The display showed a section of space that, to normal sensors, would appear completely empty. Through their modified detection grid, they could see something else, a subtle distortion in the quantum fabric of space itself. "Computer, apply the probability matrix to Grid Sector 7, Amanda commanded. "Focus on any patterns that match our theoretical models for spacetime displacement." The computer churned through the calculations as the team held their breath. After what felt like an eternity, new data began scrolling across the screen. "Holy Mother of God," O'Neill whispered. "That's not a natural phenomenon." The distortion they were tracking was moving against the background quantum noise in a deliberate pattern. More importantly, it was getting stronger. "Dr. Blackwood," Chen's voice had gone tight with tension. "These energy signatures, they match the last known readings from Sigma 7 colony, before it was destroyed." Amanda felt her heart skip a beat. "Computer, calculate trajectory of the anomaly based on current movement pattern." A red line appeared on the strategic display, extending from the distortion's current position. As they watched, it drew a perfect course directly toward New Gibraltar Station. "Sound the alert," Amanda said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "And get me a direct line to Commander Morrison. Now." The station's alert klaxons began to wail as Amanda transmitted their findings to the command center. Within minutes, Commander Jack Morrison's voice filled the lab, tense but controlled. "You're sure about this, Doctor?" "Completely," she replied, sending him the latest sensor data. "The Nighthawk's cloaking system creates distinct patterns in the quantum field. We're tracking one right now, and it's on an attack vector." There was a moment of silence on the line. "How long?" "At current speed. 3 hours, maybe 4. "But Commander," she paused, making sure her next words were absolutely clear. "We can see it. For the first time in history, we can actually see where the Nighthawk is." "Understanding the enemy is not the same as defeating it, Doctor," Morrison replied, but there was a note of hope in his voice that hadn't been there before. "No," Amanda agreed, looking at her team. Exhausted, scared, but determined. But it's a start. We need to begin modifying the defense systems immediately. The Nighthawk's about to learn that humanity is done being hunted in the dark. As the station's battle preparations began in earnest, Amanda couldn't help but feel a mix of terror and exhilaration. They had done what everyone said was impossible. They had found a way to track the untraceable. Now they just had to survive long enough to use that knowledge. The next few hours would determine whether their discovery would be humanity's salvation, or just another footnote in the Nighthawk's long history of perfect victories. Commander Jack Morrison stood in the heart of New Gibraltar's Combat Information Center, his square-jawed face illuminated by the glow of tactical displays. 2 hours and 17 minutes remained until the projected encounter with the Nighthawk, and every second counted. "Walk me through this again, Doctor," he said, his eyes fixed on the quantum signature display, where a faint distortion marked the Nighthawk's approach. "How do we hit something that exists partially outside our space-time?" Dr. Amanda Blackwood manipulated the holographic controls, bringing up a complex series of engineering schematics. The station's main weapons are already capable of hitting the target. We just need to help them see it. We're modifying the targeting systems to track the quantum distortions instead of traditional energy signatures. And these modifications, Morrison gestured to where engineering teams were racing to install new components. "They'll work." "They have to," Amanda replied, then added more confidently, "They will." Dr. Wells and her team have reconfigured the particle accelerators in the main gun array. Instead of firing standard plasma bolts, they'll generate focused beams of exotic matter. O'Neill, who had been monitoring the sensor feeds, chimed in. "The exotic matter will interact with the Nighthawk's space-time distortion field. Even if they can hide from normal weapons, they can't hide from something that operates on the same quantum principles as their cloaking technology." Morrison nodded slowly, years of combat experience warring, with the seemingly impossible science before him, and the defensive systems. "That's where it gets interesting," Dr. Chen called from his station, where he was programming new shield configurations. "We're using the station's shield generators to create a quantum field matrix. When the Nighthawk attacks, their weapons will have to pass through normal space to reach us. The matrix will give us a few crucial seconds of warning." "A few seconds?" Morrison's eyebrows rose. "That's not much." "In quantum combat, Commander," Amanda said with a grim smile, "a few seconds is an eternity." The station shuddered as another set of shield generators came online, their power draw causing minor fluctuations in the lighting. Throughout the station, non-essential systems were being shut down to divert power to the modified defense grid. "Status report," Morrison called out to the Combat Information Center staff. "Main gun modifications at 87% complete, sir. Shield matrix stabilizing at 62% capacity and rising. Evacuation of non-essential personnel to the core sections is proceeding on schedule." Amanda watched the organized chaos with a mixture of pride and apprehension. In less than 3 hours, they would either make history or become another silent monument to the Nighthawk's deadliness. "Commander," a young lieutenant called out, her voice tight with tension. "The quantum signature is accelerating. New estimated time to contact. 1 hour, 45 minutes. Morrison's face hardened. "They know we're onto them. Doctor, will we be ready?" Amanda looked at her team. O'Neill running final calibrations on the sensors, Chen programming combat algorithms, Wells coordinating with the engineering teams. They were exhausted, running on stims and determination, but none of them showed any sign of slowing down. "We'll be ready," she said, then added more quietly. "But Commander, you should know. The energy readings we're getting. This isn't just any Nighthawk. Based on the scale of the space-time distortions, this could be their flagship." Morrison was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. The Nighthawk class was already legendary. Their flagship would be something else entirely. "Then we better make sure we get this right," he finally said, turning to address the CIC staff. "All personnel, this is Commander Morrison. In less than 2 hours, we face an enemy that has never been defeated. But today, thanks to the brilliance of our scientific team, we can finally see our enemy. Today, we have a fighting chance." He paused, making eye contact with each person in the room. "I don't need to tell you what's at stake. Every colony lost, every life taken. Today we have a chance to make it mean something. Today, we show the Zoraxians that humanity is done hiding in the dark. Battle stations, everyone. Let's make history." As the CIC erupted into renewed activity, Amanda returned to her calculations. The theory was sound. The math was perfect. But in the back of her mind, a single question remained. What would the deadliest ship in the galaxy do when it realized its perfect cloak had failed? They were about to find out. The attack came without warning. One moment, the space around New Gibraltar Station was empty. The next, reality itself seemed to tear apart as the Nighthawk emerged from its quantum cloak, its midnight black hull absorbing light like a cosmic predator. Multiple energy spikes. Dr. Chen shouted from his station. "They're firing." Commander Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. "Quantum shield matrix. Now." Amanda's modified shields flared to life, just as the Nighthawk's first salvo struck. The station shuddered, but held. On the main display, the enemy vessel's true form was finally revealed to human eyes. A massive ship nearly 2 kilometers long, its hull covered in geometric patterns that seemed to bend the very light around them. "Direct hit, but damage is minimal," the defense officer reported, surprise evident in her voice. Shield matrix held at 87%. For a split second, the Nighthawk actually hesitated, its next attack delayed by what must have been shock. In all its centuries of combat, no target had ever survived its opening strike. "They're reconfiguring their weapons," O'Neill called out, his eyes fixed on the quantum readings. "The space-time distortion around their hull is intensifying." Amanda's fingers flew over her console. "That's because they're trying to adapt their cloaking field to combat frequencies. Commander, we need to strike now, while they're still processing what just happened." Morrison didn't hesitate. "Main guns, target locked." "Confirmed, sir. Exotic matter beams are charged and ready." "Fire." The station's modified main guns released streams of brilliant purple-white energy, each beam precisely calibrated to interact with the Nighthawk's quantum field. The enemy ship attempted to shift back into its cloaked state, but Amanda's calculations had been perfect. The beams followed the space-time distortions like heat-seeking missiles. 3 of the 5 shots connected, creating spectacular cascades of energy as exotic matter met the ship's advanced shielding. For the first time in known history, the Nighthawk's defenses showed signs of strain. Minor hull breach detected in their port section. Chen announced triumphantly. "We actually hit them." The victory was short-lived. The Nighthawk's response was immediate and devastating. Its hull began to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and space itself seemed to warp around the ship. Energy surged beyond measurable limits. Wells screamed from her station. "They're doing something to local space-time." The attack that followed defied description. Instead of traditional energy weapons, the Nighthawk released what looked like shards of broken reality, crystalline fragments of space-time that phased through normal matter. Where they struck, sections of the station simply ceased to exist, carved away with surgical precision. Decks 7 through 9 in Section C are just gone, the damage control officer reported, his voice shaking. "They're not destroyed. They're just not there anymore." Morrison's face was grim. "Casualties?" "None, sir. Those sections were already evacuated to the core." Amanda studied the readings from the attack. her mind racing. They're using their cloaking technology as a weapon, literally cutting pieces of our reality away. But there's a pattern to it. Computer, analyze the quantum signatures from their latest attack. Cross-reference with their shield modulation. The computer processed for a precious few seconds as the Nighthawk prepared another strike. Analysis complete. Attack pattern suggests a 0.7-second vulnerability in their space-time field when switching between offensive and defensive configurations. That's our window, Amanda said, looking at Morrison. Commander, if we time our shots just right. Morrison nodded, understanding immediately. All weapons recalibrate to these new parameters. Wait for my mark. The Nighthawk launched another volley of reality-shearing projectiles, but this time, the station was ready. As soon as the attack ended, while the enemy ship was still transitioning back to its defensive state, Morrison gave the order. Fire everything. The battle for New Gibraltar Station had truly begun, and with it, the first real test of whether humanity's science could match the most advanced weapon the Zoraxians had ever created. The battle had raged for 27 minutes, and New Gibraltar Station's Combat Information Center was filled with smoke from overloaded circuits. Dr. Amanda Blackwood worked furiously at her console, blood trickling from a cut above her eye where a fallen support beam had nearly found its mark. Their attack pattern is changing again, she called out, her voice hoarse from shouting over the chaos. They're adapting to our targeting algorithm. Commander Morrison gripped the command rail as another impact rocked the station. How many times is that now? Fourth major tactical shift in the last 10 minutes, Dr. Chen reported, his hands dancing across multiple holographic interfaces. They're learning, testing every defense we have for weaknesses. The main display showed the Nighthawk executing a maneuver that should have been impossible for a ship its size, its hull rippling with space-time distortions as it prepared another attack. Port shield matrix is failing, the defense officer shouted. We can't take another hit like the last one. Morrison's voice remained steady, despite the dire news. Dr. Blackwood, tell me you're getting something useful from all this. Amanda's eyes never left her display as she responded. More than they know, Commander. Every attack, every adaptation. It's all data. Dr. O'Neill, are you seeing this pattern in the quantum fluctuations? O'Neill, who had been silent for the past few minutes, suddenly straightened. Sweet mother of science. They're not just changing tactics, they're having to reconfigure their entire space-time field with each new attack pattern. And that takes energy, Amanda added, a fierce light in her eyes. Massive amounts of it. Computer, compare power signatures from their first attack to current levels. The analysis appeared on her screen, confirming what she'd suspected. Commander, their energy output has dropped 17% since the battle began. They're burning through power faster than they can regenerate it. Another impact rocked the station, this one tearing through the weakened port shields and ripping away a section of the outer hull. That's fascinating, Doctor, Morrison said through gritted teeth, but we're not going to last long enough to make use of that information. Yes, we will, Amanda insisted, already implementing a new series of calculations. Because now we know their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. Dr. Wells, reroute all available power to the quantum detection grid. I need to see every microscopic fluctuation in their field. Wells, who had been coordinating with engineering teams throughout the battle, complied immediately. Grid power at maximum. But the sensors won't handle this load for long. The holographic display shifted, showing the Nighthawk in previously impossible detail. Every ripple in space-time around its hull, every quantum-level distortion was now visible. There, Amanda pointed to a series of regular pulses in the ship's energy field. That's their power distribution pattern. They have to maintain a perfect balance between their offensive and defensive systems. If we can disrupt that balance, They'll either lose their cloak or their weapons, O'Neill finished, understanding dawning on his face. But how do we? His question was cut off as the Nighthawk launched its most devastating attack yet, reality-shearing projectiles combined with some kind of quantum phase beam, creating a web of destructive energy that threatened to tear the station apart. All power to forward shields. Morrison ordered, "Brace for impact." The impact never came. At the last second, the Nighthawk's attack faltered, its perfect coordination disrupted by some internal issue. Energy spike in their core, Chen shouted. They're having trouble maintaining field coherence. Amanda's fingers flew across her console. That's it. Commander, their power grid is starting to destabilize. One good hit at the right moment could force them to choose between staying visible or staying armed. Morrison's eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. How do we know which moment is the right one? Because, Amanda said, a predatory smile spreading across her face. Thanks to all this battle data, I can now predict exactly when they'll have to shift their power distribution. We just need to time our strike perfectly. The station shuddered again as the Nighthawk regained its composure and resumed its attack. But now, for the first time since the battle began, they weren't just fighting back. They were fighting with purpose. The moment of truth arrived with a scream of tortured metal as New Gibraltar Station's superstructure groaned under the strain of combat. Warning lights bathed the Combat Information Center in crimson as multiple systems approached critical failure. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 8. The damage control officer reported. Emergency force fields are failing. Commander Morrison's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Dr. Blackwood, whatever you're going to do, it needs to be now. Amanda's eyes were fixed on the quantum analysis display, watching the patterns of energy flowing through the Nighthawk's space-time field. The enemy vessel had grown desperate, its attacks becoming more powerful but less precise as its power reserves dwindled. Almost there, she muttered, her fingers dancing across the controls. They're about to hit their power distribution cycle. Dr. O'Neill, status of the main guns. Modified and ready. He called back, his Irish accent thick with tension. Exotic matter chambers are charged beyond safe limits. We'll only get one shot at this. Dr. Chen's voice rose above the din. Energy spike detected. They're charging something massive, some kind of space-time detonation device. The tactical display showed the Nighthawk's hull beginning to pulse with an otherworldly light, reality itself warping around it like a heat mirage. Whatever they were planning, it would either destroy the station or force them to retreat. They know they're vulnerable, Amanda realized. They're going to try to end this with one final attack. Morrison's face hardened. How long until they fire? 30 seconds, maybe less, Chen responded. But that's not the worst part. This kind of weapon will tear apart everything within a 1,000-kilometer radius. Amanda's mind raced. The Nighthawk was indeed vulnerable, but not in the way anyone expected. Its desperate final attack was actually the key to its destruction. Commander, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. I need every scrap of power we have left. Every battery, every auxiliary system, everything. Morrison didn't hesitate. Do it. Divert all remaining power to the main guns. The station's lights dimmed as energy was redirected, life support systems dropping to minimal levels. The main gun's power indicators climbed past critical levels, warning messages flashing across every screen. 20 seconds to enemy weapon discharge. Amanda's fingers flew across her console, making final adjustments to the targeting algorithm. Their attack is forcing them to drop all defensive fields. They're betting everything on this one strike. 15 seconds. Dr. Wells called out from her station. Power levels are beyond anything we've ever tested. The guns could explode before we even fire. 10 seconds. Target lock established, the weapons officer announced. But the enemy vessel is still partially phased. 5 seconds. Amanda watched the energy patterns, waiting for the perfect moment. Time seemed to slow as the Nighthawk's hull began to rupture with contained power, space itself bending around it like a lens. "Now," she shouted, "fire everything." The station's modified main guns released their full power in a single devastating burst. The exotic matter beam, supercharged beyond all safety limits, struck the Nighthawk at the exact moment its space-time field was at its most vulnerable. The result defied description. The enemy ship's own attack backfired catastrophically as the exotic matter beam disrupted its carefully balanced power distribution. Reality itself seemed to scream as the Nighthawk's space-time manipulation technology turned against it. For one eternal second, the legendary vessel hung in space, its perfect form illuminated by the energy tearing it apart from within. Then, with a flash that burned itself into the retinas of everyone watching, the most feared ship in known space broke apart. The silence that followed was deafening. "Direct hit," the weapons officer whispered, almost in disbelief. Target has been destroyed." Commander Morrison straightened from his battle stance, his voice quiet but clear. "Send word to Earth Defense Command. The Nighthawk is down. Repeat, the Nighthawk has been destroyed." As the cheers erupted around her, Amanda stared at the debris field that had once been an invincible enemy. The Zoraxians had created the perfect predator, but they had forgotten one critical truth. In the end, even perfection had its breaking point.